I never imagined I'd find myself caught up in something like this. Not with someone like Eleanor Pembroke. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be tangled in the dark, twisted secrets of one of the most powerful families in the city, I would have laughed it off. But now, looking back, I realize how blind I was. Eleanor always came across as the perfect daughter. To outsiders, she was a model of poise and intelligence, a woman born into wealth, raised in privilege, and deeply devoted to her father, Richard Pembroke. She was always by his side, the dutiful daughter of a man who built an empire from the ground up. That's how she appeared anyway. But what people didn't know, what I didn't know at first, was how much of that was just an illusion. It started, as these things often do, with a tragedy. Richard Pembroke, a powerhouse in the business world, died unexpectedly. At 58, he wasn't exactly old, but he had a history of heart issues. In and out of the doctor's office, managing stress with medication, always pushing himself too hard. So when he passed away from a heart attack, no one was particularly shocked. He had lived hard, worked hard, and his body had finally given out. That's what everyone thought. But Eleanor's reaction raised some questions. It wasn't just her cold, detached demeanor. It was the way she carried herself, almost as if this had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. No grief, no shock, just quiet efficiency. It unsettled me. I had known Richard for years. He was relentless in business, a man who expected perfection from those around him. But when it came to Eleanor, he softened. She was his world, the one person he seemed to trust implicitly. And yet, when he was gone, she barely shed a tear. I remember the funeral vividly. A grand event, as expected. Important figures from business and politics. Employees from Pembroke Enterprises. Old family friends. Eleanor stood before the crowd, delivering a eulogy with perfect composure. She spoke about Richard's achievements, his strength, his legacy. But something was missing. Emotion. It was like watching a performance, every word carefully rehearsed, every gesture calculated. I tried to brush it off. Grief is unpredictable. Some people shut down, process things differently. But what came after made it impossible to ignore. The day after the funeral, Eleanor was already at Pembroke Enterprises, meeting with accountants and lawyers. That wasn't unusual. Someone had to handle her father's affairs. But what struck me as odd was the speed with which she moved. By the end of that same week, she had begun liquidating assets, selling off high-value properties that Richard had spent years acquiring. And she wasn't being cautious about it. She was selling fast and cheap, almost as if she wanted to get rid of them as quickly as possible. People noticed. Richard had built his portfolio carefully, and suddenly, Eleanor was dismantling it piece by piece. But no one wanted to question her. She was his only heir. It was her right to do as she pleased. I kept telling myself that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the car accident. About a month after Richard's death, Eleanor crashed one of his prized vintage Rolls-Royces. The accident itself wasn't serious. She walked away without a scratch. But the car? Completely totaled. Just another piece of her father's legacy, reduced to scrap metal. That in itself wasn't damning. Accidents happen. But what made me uneasy was how quickly she filed the insurance claim. Almost as if the car had been nothing more than an asset to be disposed of. A mere financial transaction. Richard had loved that car. It wasn't just about the money. It was sentimental. To see it gone so suddenly, so carelessly, made me wonder if there was more to Eleanor than I had realized. Then came the real revelation. The autopsy report. I wasn't supposed to see it. A friend of mine at the hospital let something slip over coffee. Something he shouldn't have. There were traces of poison in Richard's system. Not just a single dose, but a slow accumulation over months. Richard Pembroke hadn't simply died of heart failure. He had been murdered. I felt sick. Eleanor had been the one handling his medications. She had access to everything. She knew his routines, his weaknesses, and she had used that knowledge to systematically weaken him, making his death look like the inevitable result of his failing health. I kept thinking back to that eulogy, that expressionless, practiced performance, the calculated way she had handled his estate, the properties sold, the business reshaped, the accident, the insurance claim. It all fit into place like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was assembling. But the question remained, why? Money? Power? Was she that ruthless, that cold? The investigation confirmed what I had feared. Eleanor had been planning this for years. She knew exactly when to act, how to cover her tracks. She had been playing the long game, and she had nearly gotten away with it. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on: the toxicology report. It was the detail that cracked everything open. The police dug deeper, uncovering financial records, phone calls, emails. They found inconsistencies, quiet dealings with buyers before Richard had even passed, discrepancies in how his medications had been handled. Everything pointed to Eleanor. When they arrested her, it wasn't a dramatic scene. No handcuffs in front of a crowd, no screaming denials. She was calm, composed, just like she had been at the funeral. At first, she maintained her innocence. Why would she kill the father who had given her everything? It was absurd, she claimed. A misunderstanding. But as the evidence piled up, her mask began to slip. Witnesses came forward. Employees spoke about the sudden changes in the company. Lawyers revealed that Richard had been in the process of adjusting his will, something Eleanor had likely discovered. If he had completed those changes, she wouldn't have inherited everything. She had to act before that happened. And she had. Her trial was long, filled with details that made it clear just how calculated she had been. The slow poisoning, the manipulation, the precise dismantling of her father's empire. In the end, the jury didn't take long to convict her. But when the verdict was read, Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't break down. She just sat there, silent, as if she had already accepted it. Maybe, in some twisted way, she had. I still don't know what unsettles me more, the crime itself or the way she carried it out. It wasn't rage. It wasn't an impulsive act. It was deliberate, patient, cold. She had taken her time, waited for the right moment, and executed her plan flawlessly. But in the end, she lost. She got what she wanted, her father's fortune, control over his empire. But she lost something far greater, her freedom, her legacy, her humanity. And now, as I think back to the Eleanor I thought I knew, I realize she never really existed. She was just another piece of the illusion, just another part of the game she had been playing all along. And Richard Pembroke? He never saw it coming. Some say she never showed remorse, that even in prison, she carried herself with the same unshaken composure. But I wonder, in those quiet moments, does she ever regret it? Does she ever replay those choices in her mind? Or was she always this way, her heart as cold as the empire she once sought to control? Maybe, in the end, Eleanor was never mourning her father at all. Maybe she was only mourning the fact that she got caught. Even now, with her locked away, I can't shake the feeling that she still has a plan, still calculating, still waiting. But for what? Only time will tell.